Okay, I'm just going to quickly show you a resource, a web resource that you can visit and explore yourself in more detail that attempts to present what is, after all, quite a complex framework, and that's this one. And it's Diana Laurillard's Conversational Frameworks. And what she's attempted to do here is to look at how conversation works between the instructor, here shown on the left, and the learner, shown on the right. And probably the easiest way to illustrate it is to kind of start to click around, and this is what you perhaps should do when you visit this particular site. So if we look at this first box, for example, if you mouse over it, I don't know if you can see that, it might be a bit small, but I've needed to kind of shrink it to show you the whole page. So the first step would be that the instructor on the left describes a particular conception to the learner on the right. So an example might be an instructor shows a diagram of a fission chain reaction and explains using a concept or a diagram. The learner then would describe that back to the tutor, so they'd explain the fission chain reaction back to the teacher. The instructor would then clarify that concept in light of what the learner has said. So you might notice some inaccuracies in the learner's conception of fission and explain it a little bit further. And then finally the learner would re-describe the concept. So re-describe fission, having corrected those inaccuracies. And I guess you could continue with that loop over and over until you got it right. So that's kind of the cognitive side of things. At the bottom of the page, what we've got is the behavioural side of things. So again, starting with the instructor on the right, they would identify clear learning objectives. An example might be that students got to explain the difference between fusion and fission. The learner then attempts to meet the instructor's goal and draws a diagram, let's say, of the fission-fusion reaction and explains the difference between the two. The instructor would then provide additional re-description and/or links to new information, so they'd explain fission and fusion a little bit more, and the learner would adapt the feedback from the instructor and redraw the diagram. So that's broadly how it works. Now you'll see in the middle of the page are these different links that you can click on, because Laurillard's model is quite a complex and detailed one, and one of the things she does is to explore that model and how it would work in these different contexts. So perhaps the one we might be most interested in at the moment is this interactive one. So if we click there, what she's saying is that she's proposing 3 possible ways of having this kind of dialogue with students through use of interactive digital resources. And if we look at Hypermedia, you'll see that only the top link there, theories and ideas going from the instructor to the learner, are highlighted. And if we click and hold on there, it says materials with open access to navigable links between text, graphics and multimedia. So it's just a delivery method for getting stuff to the learner. If we then look at enhanced hypermedia, it's a much fuller set of interactions. More of those little boxes have gone yellow, and that's explained a little here. If you click and hold, it says media is constructed to allow students to build understanding and is adaptive to students' needs. Students have the freedom to explore but also receive guidance. So it's a little bit more than just click and drag. So that might include Web 2 as well as Web 1 technologies. And then finally she makes this distinction with web resources, which are hypermedia resources that are made available via the web instead of a disk. So the enhanced hypermedia and the web resources are similar, except, at least this is what I think is meant by this, except that the web resources are now available over the internet. So that's a very brief overview of this model, and there's a lot more in it to discover. And what I'd recommend you do in order to fully understand Laurillard's frameworks is to visit this particular web address and have a play around with that model and see what you can discover. And the key thing, I guess, in all of that is to be trying to think about, is this useful to me? Does exploring Laurillard's conversational frameworks enhance my understanding of interactivity, or help me to think of ways in which I might apply it to my own practice?